what love looks like when it shows up in the darkest chapter of your life? Today, we're diving into a deeply emotional story about Lena, a blind girl, a broken past, and the kind of love that sees far beyond the eyes. Let's dive in. Late autumn in Philadelphia brought with it a sharp chill, as if the entire city shared Lena Moore's loneliness. At 24, she lived in a run-down apartment with her mother, Darla, a former stage makeup artist turned faded shadow, buried under cheap liquor and mounting debts. The cramped room reeked of mildew and cigarettes, and no sunlight could ever pierce the darkness that clouded Lena's eyes, or her heart. Lena had lost her vision at 12, after an accident that shattered more than just bones. Since then, her world had been shaped by sounds, scents, and lingering memories. But it wasn't her blindness that made her unforgettable. It was her voice, deep, soulful, like poetry breathed into life. Her dream of becoming a writer still lived quietly inside her, buried under the ashes of a life that had never been kind. One evening, her mother stumbled into the room, voice raspy, breath soaked in alcohol. "Lena," she said, a strange brightness in her tone, "I've got good news. A man wants to help us, get us out of here." But as Lena would soon learn, the word help can mean many things, and not all of them are kind. Lena sat across from her mother at the old kitchen table, her hands resting lightly on the sticky surface. She could hear Darla's fingers tapping nervously, a habit she'd long associated with lies. The air felt thick, foreboding. "He's a music producer," Darla said, her voice laced with forced excitement. "His name's Ethan Kingsley. He heard you reciting poetry at that community event last month. Said he was blown away." Lena nodded slowly. She remembered the event, one of the rare times she had felt free, like herself. She vaguely recalled someone speaking to her mother afterward, but she never imagined it would lead to this. "I met him again," Darla went on. "He wants to help you, give you a chance, a better life." "How?" Lena asked, her voice steady but low. "Just stay with him for a while. At his house, outside the city. He's lonely, and you won't have to worry about anything anymore." Silence fell like a cold blanket over the kitchen. Lena's chest tightened. "And you agreed?" she whispered. Darla didn't answer right away. She looked away and muttered, "I had to. The loan shark said they'd kill us both if I didn't pay. I didn't have a choice." "No choice?" Lena let out a bitter laugh. "You sold your daughter and called it no choice?" "You'll live like a queen," Darla snapped, her voice breaking. "I did this to protect you." Lena stood, her legs trembling but resolute. She didn't need sight to know. From this moment on, she had no mother. "He's coming tonight," Darla said softly. "Just pack a few things. He'll handle everything else." Lena walked to her room, her heart shattering with each step like glass underfoot. Not because she'd been sold, but because the one who did it was supposed to love her most. Lena had never heard a car door close so gently. That sound, low, firm, expensive, felt like the final punctuation mark to her old life. Ethan Kingsley's mansion stood in a quiet suburb, far from the car horns, the stench of trash, and the daily threats. The air here was clean, scented with flowers and new wood, but to Lena it was cold and unfamiliar to the point of numbness. "We're here," Ethan's voice came from beside her, warm and calm. "Do you want me to guide you in?" "I can handle it myself," Lena replied bluntly. "I've managed on my own for 12 years. He didn't say anything more, just quietly walked ahead and opened the door for her. Inside the mansion, every step Lena took echoed on the polished hardwood floor. Ethan described everything: the hallway, the stairs, the library, the music room. She didn't respond. Every word he said only made her feel like she was being arranged, like an item placed in its designated spot. "Your room is in the east wing," he said. "No need to use stairs. It has a private bathroom, a small kitchen. Everything is designed for the visually impaired." "How thoughtful of you," she said bitterly. "Thoughtful when buying a person." Ethan inhaled deeply. "I didn't buy you, Lena." "Then what else would you call this?" she scoffed. There was no reply. Lena ran her hand along the wall, feeling its smoothness, cleanliness, coldness. This place was nothing like the slum she used to live in. It was too quiet, too perfect, too not home. And even though they called her a guest, Lena knew clearly she was living in a cage, a luxurious, sparkling cage, but a cage nonetheless. 3 days passed in silence. Lena kept to herself in her suite, only leaving when she was certain Ethan wasn't home. The housekeeper, Miss Margie, was the only person she spoke to, an older woman with a warm and endlessly patient voice. But even that kindness couldn't soothe the feeling of being lost, of not belonging. On the 4th evening, a storm rolled in. Lena was sitting in the library listening to an audiobook when thunder cracked loudly and the power went out. The air suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. She stood up, reaching for her cane, but as she moved toward the door, her hip slammed into the corner of a bookshelf. Pain shot through her side and she stumbled, her cane clattering to the floor, sliding out of reach. She dropped to her knees, sweeping her hands across the floor, panic and humiliation rising in her throat. "Lena?" Ethan's voice came from the doorway. "I'm fine," she said quickly, voice trembling. "Just drop my cane." He stepped inside, his voice quieter now. "It's to your right, about a meter away." Lena reached in the direction he'd said. When her fingers closed around the handle, she exhaled in relief. "Thank you." "Let me walk you to your room," he offered, gently. "No need," she replied, but when thunder boomed again outside, she instinctively flinched. Ethan stepped closer, his hand lightly pressing against the small of her back. The warmth of that touch seeped through her blouse, making her heart skip a beat. They walked slowly through the dark hallway. Ethan described each turn, each step. His voice became a map she could follow. A loud thunderclap, Lena startled, losing balance. Ethan caught her, one arm around her waist, the other on her arm. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice lower now. "Yes," she whispered, and then she realized she was crying. His fingers gently touched her cheek, wiping away a tear that had slipped down. The tenderness in that gesture froze her in place. She leaned slightly toward him, instinctively drawn to his warmth. In that moment, between the darkness, the scent of rain, and the trembling they didn't yet have names for, something had begun. The next morning, the sun returned. The air after rain carried the scent of earth and damp leaves. Lena woke with her mind still clinging to the warmth of the previous night, Ethan's hand on her back, his voice guiding her. She didn't want to admit it, but it stirred something in her heart. Margie had mentioned the Eastern Garden, a path paved with stone designed for easy navigation for the visually impaired. Lena made her way there, breathing in the scent of jasmine, roses, and soft sunshine on her skin. In the center of the garden was a small gazebo. She stepped inside, found the wooden bench by touch, and sat down. The space felt like a cocoon, and without thinking, Lena began to sing, a folk song her grandmother used to lull her with at night. Her voice, rich and velvety, filled the air like a breath. "Don't stop," Ethan's voice came from behind her, making her jump. "I didn't mean to intrude, but your voice is incredible." "It's just an old song," she murmured, cheeks warming. "Would you like to come to the music room?" Ethan asked hesitantly. "I have a piano. Maybe I could play and you could sing?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. The music room was wide, echoing, filled with sunlight. When Ethan placed his hands on the keys, the first notes rang out, uncertain, then gradually forming rhythm. Lena listened, felt, then slowly added her voice. Between them, music filled the space. No explanations, no guards, just two people, sharing a moment they couldn't name. When the song ended, neither spoke. Lena stood near the piano, her fingers resting on the polished wood where music had just breathed. "That was something," Ethan whispered. "And that," Lena replied, "can't be bought." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. The music still echoed in her mind. Ethan's piano, her own voice, and the silence that followed. A silence no longer filled with distance, but with connection. Close to midnight, she left her room, feeling her way down the quiet hallway. She didn't know why, but her steps led her toward Ethan's room. As she neared, she heard sounds. Ragged breathing, then a choked cry like someone trapped in a dream. Without hesitation, Lena knocked. "Ethan?" she called softly but clearly. No answer, just more movement inside. She tried the handle. It wasn't locked. He was sitting on the bed, t-shirt soaked with sweat, hands trembling as they clutched his head. I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. I didn't mean to scare you." "Nightmare?" Lena stepped closer, her voice gentler. Ethan nodded, inhaling shakily. "It's been a while, but tonight it came back." "About who?" she asked. "My wife," Ethan answered, voice rough. "She died 3 years ago, a car accident. I couldn't save her, and every night in my dreams I see that look of knowing she's going to die." He choked slightly, grief breaking through. Lena said nothing. She simply stepped forward, found his hand and held it tightly. "You're not the only one with scars," she whispered. Silence. "You're the first person who's made me feel alive," Ethan said hoarsely. "That terrifies me." "Me too," Lena replied, just as softly. They sat side by side on the edge of the bed, needing no more words. Between two wounded hearts, something had begun to heal. A week later, Ethan hosted a major charity gala at the estate. Between golden light and polished smiles, Lena wore the deep blue dress, hair swept elegantly, hand in hand with Ethan as they entered the grand hall beneath admiring eyes. She smiled, believing happiness had finally found her, until a soft voice behind her said, "Lena, right? I'm Olivia. Ethan and I go way back." Lena turned. Olivia, graceful, beautiful, and with eyes that knew too much, approached with a warm smile that chilled Lena to her core. "Ethan has a big heart," Olivia said. "He always takes in the broken. After everything he's lost, helping others became a habit." She leaned in, lowering her voice. "Maybe you're part of that pattern. Maybe he needs you to be fragile, so he can feel strong." Lena swallowed hard. Olivia stepped even closer. "But when you're no longer someone to fix, he'll lose interest. He always does. That's the part he won't tell you. And then you'll be left behind, just like the others." Olivia walked away, her heels echoing like clock ticks counting down to heartbreak. Lena stood frozen in the crowded hall, her soul spiraling into silence. When Ethan turned to look for her, she was already gone. Lena left that night without looking back. She needed space to breathe, a place where the darkness was less frightening than the doubt in her heart. She stayed at Mrs. Wilson's apartment, the kind neighbor who had once shielded her from life's harshest days. Her eyes could not see, but her chest ached with every breath. 3 days later, as Lena walked carefully across the small living room, a familiar voice called from behind. "Sweetheart, Mama's here to take you home." It was Teresa, and beside her stood a strange man, his voice low and cold as steel. "Mr. Antoine is in the music business," Teresa said. "He wants to hear you sing. This is your chance." "No," Lena backed away. "I'm not going anywhere." "You don't get to choose," Teresa snapped. "It's already arranged. You owe me. Now it's time to pay." The man stepped closer, reaching for her. Lena recoiled and screamed. Just then, the door burst open. "Get away from her!" Ethan's voice roared through the room. He rushed in, shielding Lena from the stranger. A blade flashed, cutting across his arm, but Ethan didn't retreat. Blood darkened his sleeve, but he stood firm, the only barrier between her and the fear she couldn't see. Sirens pierced the silence as red and blue lights flooded the apartment. By the time the chaos cleared, Teresa and the man were gone, handcuffed, taken by a justice Lena never thought would come. Ethan collapsed into a chair, breath ragged. Lena knelt before him, her hands trembling as she traced the wound on his arm. "You came," she whispered. "And I always will," Ethan replied. "Wherever you are." Lena returned to the estate with Ethan the following afternoon. She didn't say much on the way back, but her hand held his, gently yet steady like a promise. Margie opened the door, her eyes red. She said nothing, just hugged Lena tightly, like a lost daughter finally coming home. On the first day, Lena stayed in her room. She needed time to reacquaint herself with the sounds of the house, the creaking steps, the scents, the silence. On the second day, she found her way to the garden. Her fingers touched each petal, each curve of the stone bench where she once sang. Everything was still there. But she was no longer the same. Ethan didn't push, he simply stayed near. Present, close enough that she knew he was there, but never invading. She felt his breath in the rooms she entered. And sometimes, in the quietest of nights, she heard the soft sound of piano drifting through the halls, gentle, like the voice of a heart asking for forgiveness. On the fourth evening, Lena entered the music room. Ethan was there, not waiting for her, just playing, quietly. She stood for a long moment, then softly said, "Play for me." He nodded. His fingers touched the keys and the music flowed, like a stream in the night. Lena sat beside him. She didn't touch him. She just listened. When the piece ended, she spoke. "I'm not the girl you first met. I'm no longer afraid of the dark." "I know," Ethan said. "You're stronger. And I choose you every day, not because I need someone to protect me," she said, "but because I want to walk beside you." Ethan turned toward her. Lena couldn't see his face, but she heard his breath catch. They didn't kiss, didn't embrace. They just sat there, hands barely touching, and the whole world was silent. A week after the night they sat together in the music room, Ethan brought Lena to the East Garden, where jasmine, lavender, and climbing roses bloomed in the full glory of spring. She couldn't see their colors fully, but the scent surrounded her like a sweet symphony. The breeze caught her dress, and the rustling leaves whispered like old friends. He led her down a gravel path, then stopped before a blooming cluster of white flowers. "There's something," Ethan said, voice slightly trembling. "I've held on to this for a long time." He placed a ring in her hand, delicate, light as breath, but Lena recognized every curve. It was his grandmother's ring, the one from the woman who had taught him that love never fades. "Lena," he said, "you're the only one who made me believe a heart can heal again. Will you marry me?" She nodded, her lips trembling, tears falling like rain. "I already chose you, not because you saved me, but because I saw you, even in my darkness. Today and every day after." 6 months later, they were married in that same garden where Ethan had first asked. Flowers bloomed wildly, golden light bathed the world, and soft piano notes drifted from the old music room. Lena walked the petal-strewn path, hand in hand with Ethan, her heart trembling with every step. After the wedding, Lena underwent an experimental eye surgery. The doctors made no promises, but a quiet miracle followed. She began to sense light, shapes, and sometimes even faint color. Though her vision didn't return completely, Lena no longer felt like she lived in darkness. She had found the real light, not in her eyes, but in her soul. It was love, honest, unconditional, rising above pain, past, and fear. Ethan and Lena lived together like two halves of one soul, stitched together not by perfection, but by presence. Every sunrise brought quiet joys, fresh coffee, shared laughter, a piano note drifting through sunlit halls. Life wasn't flawless, but it was full, and it was theirs. And in every touch, every shared laugh, Lena knew. Whether she could see or not, she had already witnessed the most beautiful thing life could offer.